Masonic pattern. Obviously this book will have to expand out into other editions where I can detail more of what's going on. The more I write, the more I see how much has to be written. However, something must get to the people now. I want the reader to know that even if some of this seems hazy now, just keep with it and you will see the pieces connect. I'm not telling you anything but what has been unveiled to me. With that being said, I'm intentionally cutting the book short and we will call this the first edition. Several mind control triggers were used when the elite made the moves to make Barack Obama president. In several movies that made it to the box office before Barack came into the spotlight, they showed the President of the United States as an African American. Those movies were made to be favorable box office hits and the viewer was then set in the fertile soil for the future move. This way it almost seems like it already happened when the actual scenario starts to take place. This makes people more comfortable in thinking it was their idea. Many of these types of methods were 184 PAGE. Learned from German mind control scientists and were put to the test in the CIA's Project Encounter. Their work on compartmentalizing the brain was phenomenally riveting. Reason 138. This is how suggestive mind control works. The dream poster was to trigger the feeling of Martin Luther King Jr. getting African Americans to believe that they would finally be treated with justice when Barack came into office. Since African Americans don't generally vote, not believing in such nonsense as politics, this time they showed up at the polls, which caused the Republican Party, who always vote, to be outnumbered. Although they could always just cheat and rig the vote, it is better when it is a conscious decision by the people. This way a pact or agreement is made, thus the outcome will be entirely the fault of the voter for participating in the election. As also seen here, they prepped everyone first through the media for the African American president, who is really an incarnate of pharaonic energy. We will discuss briefly a topic that is way out of the box, my hangout. Since the inner core of these societies have mastered death and resurrection, they know how to reincarnate into this world again and assume various roles of leadership. Below I'm showing profound proof of this. Remember, 185 PAGE. Many people were lured into these occult circles by the promise of consecutive lives. I believe for some that promise was kept due to their particular position on the pyramid. I doubt that those on the bottom of the pyramid enjoyed such mystical prestige. Let us look at those who may be closer to the top of the pyramid. Reason 139. Once you hear real truth, it's much stranger than fiction. When addressing the nation from the White House, Obama will stand in a pyramid which will be on the floor below the podium, traced in gold. In the magic evocation of entities, the apparition will appear in the triangle drawn by the magician. If the magician stands in the triangle, he becomes the vessel for the apparition to communicate through. For a novice, standing inside the triangle can result in death, as the spirits that are not trained, then tamed, will tear apart the magician. The adept strikes fear in the heart of the spirits by having in their possession certain things such as daggers, swords, jewels, crooks, rings, herbs, and various other consecrated magical items designed for such purposes. Some of the secret organizations were known to possess the secret of bringing one back in contact with their double. This was of the greatest value because it gave the initiate the natural powers associated with being completely balanced and assembled or remembered. This also took place in the pyramid while lying in the sarcophagus. This also gives the initiate the ability to sing, dance, and act, 186 PAGE. To an amazing degree of perfection, since they are now using the side associated with perfect articulation and true genius. Those who are still split marvel at the accomplishments of these people and become fans, groupies, gopi, and worshippers of these false idols who use the secret to their advantage. 187 PAGE. Reason 140. In my studies into the occult, there can be only two explanations for this type of doppelganger effect. Either the same spirit has possessed the same individuals that look similar to each other, as strong spirits are known to change the facial appearance and sometimes bodily features of the host. Or they have actually pulled their doppelgangers from the parallel and are living double lives. Both of these scenarios can be accomplished by a very skilled adept, In each photo there are two different people. When King Nebuchadnezzar entered Jerusalem, he set the Temple of Solomon on fire. When asked about it, he said he was carrying out the will of Marduk. This would solve one of the biggest issues we face with deciphering who is on what side, because this shows that although both of these sects appeared to worship the sun, planets, and serpents, it is in all actuality some worship serpents, and others amphibians. Still others worship the horn gods like the Ram, Ramses, Ra, Mendes, Tet, etc. The Bible says that the dragon had several heads and they began to devour one another until two remained. Of course, we find the tales of Solomon in much of the Hebraic law and in the Masonic rites, in which they confess that Solomon was the first master mason. The temple itself was known as the Double Square. When locating the ancient depictions of the real Solomon, which are very hard to locate, I came across two, one by the Russians, and the other by the Rastafarians. Solomon is depicted in both the motif and the basque relief as half man, half reptilian or amphibian. Religions like Islam, Catholicism, Christianity, and Judaism all support and defend Solomon as the wisest king, so it is better to throw them all in the bag together. When reading works like the Testament of Solomon, which details his dealings with nefarious demons who are made to confess their crimes and then put in service of building the temple, it becomes obvious all who studied the Gnostic doctrines of these groups became magicians, wizards, called then wizard, and various other types of mystics. 188 PAGE. Once Israel subdues the complete portion of the Promised Land, it fulfills a much-awaited prophecy, which is obtaining all the land that was originally promised to them by the God of the Bible. It becomes obvious that the God of the Bible promotes the Israelites to kill in order to obtain what clearly belonged to someone else before they invaded. This becomes no different than what the so-called founding father of the Americas did to the indigenous that were there first. Even the Hebrew Book of Light states that the children of Israel who wandered around the wilderness and never made it to the Promised Land were those who found favor with the true God. Thus they gained an attachment to the wilderness and nature versus a city flowing with milk and honey. Milk and honey were just symbolism for the cow and the two animals sacred to the Egyptians. We now see returning to the Promised Land was more like becoming the Egyptians for the Hebrews based upon the way they are ruling now. There is absolutely no excuse for such barbaric behavior unless of course you are serving a bloodthirsty deity, which brings up the point again about sacrifice. How can it escape a person's judgment that if something is asking you to slaughter thousands of cattle and various other animals into a huge furnace of fire, it could possibly not be something negative? Putting yourself in the moment is key. Throwing a living cow in a furnace 10 times heated would sound horrible. Just think of thousands of them back to back mooing to the moon like crazy. This would not smell like the drive-thru at Burger King since the fur was not removed. Some will say, well, Jesus did away with animal sacrifice, and I will say, so we moved on to child sacrifice? This God now tells his so-called only son to sacrifice himself? No parent in their right mind would participate in such demonic activity, thus many in history not in their right mind did. This is the drawback of only using your left mind. This does not come up only once but at least twice in the modern Bible, where Abraham is also told to sacrifice Isaac, paying no mind to the strict rules against child sacrifice in the Bible. For the God to even use this as some test seems unethical and hypocritical. The behavior of an individual will ultimately determine what they are about, so through treachery and subterfuge the world has been set in array. Once the prophecy is fulfilled of Greater Israel, it indicates it will be time for their next move, which is to rebuild the third temple of Solomon in Jerusalem using the demons again, of course. The New Jerusalem is spoken of in Revelations coming down from the sky, and that cannot be fulfilled until the third temple is complete. What remains of the last temple of Solomon in Jerusalem is only the Wailing Wall, which is why the Zionists are so fond of it. Obama was even instructed to pay a trip to it, Yarmouk and all. The proposed location of the new temple is where the Dome of the Rock, a sacred Islamic mosque, sits now. It is known that if something happens to the Dome of the Rock, Muslims beyond number will become extremely violent and spread real terror upon the earth such as it has never been seen. 189 PAGE. Reason 141 The Zionist, who are now making the